Camera rolling. Yeah, and... Okay. Hi, Rana. Camera is rolling. Ready?
I feel like I have to burp, but other than that, yeah.
Okay, if you do, just do it. I mean, you're grown. Camera rolling. Hey.
Hi.
Camera rolling. Hey.
Hi.
So hey,
Hi.
how you doing?
I'm alright. I'm tired.
I feel you,
I'm probably gonna take a nap after this.
bitch. I totally feel you. Rolling. So hey.
Hey.
Camera rolling.
All right.
Okay. Do we need to test the sound? Can you hear it, I guess?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Okay, cool.
Literally, I have no clue how to fix the record level on this, so I'm just like assuming that everything's fine.
Okay.
My name is Kate Hoffman. I use they, them pronouns.
My name is Rana Sobeh. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
So I'm Brianna Means. She, her, hers.
I'm Cynthia, she, her pronouns.
I'm Clary, she, her pronouns.
My name is Bonnie Olivia Ethel May Harris Lowe. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Is that like... Because I think I'm going to do like nameplates in the lower third.
Oh, I don't know how many names you want, so I was just like, let's just do the whole thing and see what happens.
Do you want all 6 names?
You don't have to.
Okay.
My name is Bonnie Harris Lowe. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
I'm Jeremy Hines, and he, him, his.
My name is Theodore Santos, and my pronouns are he, him, his.
My name is Yanelis Vialta, and I use she, her pronouns.
Matt, mostly. They.
So we're starting with like media representation.
Yes, my jam.
It is. It certainly is. So what kind of entertainment media do you typically consume?
I watch a lot of TV. I watch Jane the Virgin, How to Get Away with Murder, Scandal, The Mindy Project, Love and Hip Hop as a guilty pleasure.
But in general, I like Jane the Virgin a lot. I haven't caught up, but I will. I love Sense8, and I recently watched The OA.
America's Next Top Model, we watched Glee.
Yeah.
We watched Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, yeah, that was a lot of time.
Right now I'm watching Celia, which is a telenovela.
I've been watching How to Get Away with Murder, and I like some comedies like The Office.
There's a fair amount of like 90s TV trash that I consume. Charmed is Life. So I watched The OA. It was pretty good. I watched Chewing Gum, which was amazing.
I like Dexter.
That's what thinking that.
That's what I've been watching at the gym, but I've already seen it, so I'm just rewatching it now. Criminal Minds, House, they're all the same show, just different settings. iZombie, which we watched together.
I love political dramas like House of Cards, quite obviously. It's a great one.
I watch a lot of superhero shows, so The Flash. I've been really into Fresh Off the Boat lately.
I really don't watch a lot of like TV. Watch a lot of anime.
I do a lot of cartoons like Steven Universe and anime.
I like Mr. Robot. I also like fantasy ones like certain anime. Like there's this one called Seven Deadly Sins.
I guess my favorite ones are like, I really like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
I've been watching Bob's Burgers at night. I watch Adventure Time, Steven Universe.
So I'm either watching CNN or Steven Universe.
And also short web series, so Brown Girls web series which I was watching before you came here, and I Love You But, which is about Lebanese Australian beard marriages.
And then BuzzFeed, like I feel like everyone watches BuzzFeed videos. Pero like is like, it's not really a series, like it's their kind of their own thing under BuzzFeed, which is kind of catered towards Latinx folk.
Try to follow some lesbian YouTubers, so Ari Fitz, I also follow her on Snapchat, and Foxy Hot Mess, Amber's Closet.
I love Kathleen Lights. She's actually Cuban, so I like her like extra.
I like to listen to podcasts, and I don't really have a favorite podcast. Actually, no, we listened to Alice Isn't Dead together, which has a queer storyline, which is awesome. Waiting for the next one to come out.
About Race, which I don't like that much a lot of the time, but I like to see what they're saying. And Code Switch, which is also hit and miss.
I listen to Latino USA, which is an NPR podcast.
The Electronic Intifada podcast, Good Muslim, Bad Muslim.
All Latino, can't tell what I like to listen to, which is like alternative Latinx music.
I do see myself in things like YouTube, because I'm specifically picking like hijabi YouTubers, or like whatever. I don't wear hijab now, but I used to, or like Muslim YouTubers or women of color.
As a woman, the representation can go, I think it's getting better in a lot of ways, but it's also like certainly not where it should be. And there really just like aren't biracial characters in pretty much anything.
Okay, so I think that I intentionally choose media that caters to me, or to just women of color in general. Jane the Virgin, the cast is all Latinx. The main character is a Latina woman. How to Get Away with Murder and Scandal both lead women of color, Black women.
With things like TV or movies, because it's like top down, like it's much harder to get representations of me as a Muslim.
So in what ways do you see yourself represented in these media?
Well, you know, outside of a couple of instances, not a lot. As a young Black queer woman, like, you don't see that very often. And sometimes when you do see yourself in media, it's not always the best representation.
As a Black guy, obviously, it's been a lot better since the 90s. I do think as a bisexual Black man, that's a far harder representation to find in any media that I know of.
Even with my sexuality, the different aspects of it, definitely not altogether.
So like in shows that you do watch, like there'll be like a gay character or like a lesbian, but you very like even bisexual characters and stuff I've watched has been like pretty rare. And then even the trans characters I've seen are all like binary trans, so like a trans woman or trans man. There's really been no discussion of like, you know, gender non-conforming or just, you know, bigender, whatever, anything besides like a man or a woman.
I don't think I've ever really watched a show and seen like a more gender neutral, gender queer-esque character actually like ever explicitly stated or shown.
Honestly, off the top of my head, cannot think of a show that has a non-binary character on it.
In what ways do you see yourself represented, and in what ways are you not represented?
I don't see myself represented.
Usually never represented.
Okay.
I never expect to be represented.
I guess I don't really look for myself representation in media that much anymore.
It can be hard finding like a really good comedy, because usually comedies can make some pretty awful jokes, and then especially like transphobic jokes and stuff, and then I'm like, this isn't funny.
If they have any trans people, oftentimes it's in a very comedic sense and not in like a good way, in like a very offensive way.
Having a man play a trans woman is almost kind of reinforcing the whole notion that people are seeing trans women as like a man dressing up.
Like, you know, boys who dress like girls are butt of a joke, or girls who dress like boys are the butt of a joke, or...
And so I started watching Charmed again as my example. Very problematic. There's even an episode where magic accidentally turns one of them into a boy, and it's horrible.
Oh no.
In terms of media, I've almost never seen like trans men portrayed. Usually I think there's a fixation on trans women. I feel like people are more like, I guess, focused on like, I don't know, the body, and like that's much more, I guess, shocking maybe to have on TV. Or
there's always those scenes in movies where it's like the tomboy has to go through like a makeover to look pretty, and it's like, that's absurd. Like, why is that a thing?
When I see something on television or I see something out in the world that actually has a positive representation of someone like me, it's almost like, wow, this is great. But then you have to kind of like go on with your day, because you know that you're probably not going to see that for a while.
Or on the opposite, you have people that crave representation so much that even when it's really problematic, like the George Lopez show, you still watch.
You know, you get more of the Real Housewives than the proper representation. You don't see doctors, lawyers. You don't see professionals. You see baby mamas.
I think the mom in Blackish is biracial or something.
She is.
Yeah, but I don't watch that show. So the reason that I don't is because like with the first trailer that I ever saw for it, it was like it was talking about the mom being biracial, but it did it in a way that made me really uncomfortable. Saying the whole, you're like, oh, you're not black. Oh, if I'm not black, then why is my hair and my butt like this and stuff like that? And I was just like, I don't really like that.
How do you feel about Modern Family?
I hate it. I hate that I love it so much. Sofia Vergara, like her
Yeah.
character is horrible. Like she's great, but she's horrible, you know? And the worst thing about it is that Sofia Vergara is like, it just like, she doesn't understand. Like, she's like, I just think it's just humor. It's just funny. I'm like, they have you on this show because you look a certain way, you speak with a certain accent, and you're funny because of those things. Like, the fact that you have an accent, that's not funny. Like, that's not funny. That's it. Like, my dad has a huge accent. Like, you saying that it's funny makes him insecure about speaking English.
I get kind of annoyed with some TV shows that like, oh, like this character's bi or whatever, but it's not like explicit, like Legend of Korra. But then when I watch it, I get to the very end and I'm just like, okay, that was it. Like a longing gaze, and then they walk into like the portal or whatever together.
So it can be really heartbreaking when it's like, here, have this maybe queer character, just kidding. Like over and over and over. And as time is progressing, it's like more and more and more like blatantly maybe queer, and then like, nope, sorry, we're not ready for this yet.
It's always as a character who's either like a terrorist or someone who views Islam negatively and is trying to get away from it. One of the earliest shows that I remember seeing a character like this on was Degrassi. She thought that she had to wear like these long clothes and like whatever, and she would wear them to school and then change in the bathroom. And like take them off and like be like the queen bee of the school or whatever, and it's just like annoying to see her like, okay, like yes, the very easy to predict plot line is that you're running away from your restrictive religion. Like, all right, cool.
Bi-ness is seen as like this either or 50-50 kind of thing. It's characterized through threesomes with that kind of trope. It's very much degraded by the other gay and lesbian members, and viewed as like a stepping stone to coming out as a binary monosexual.
When I was younger, I used to take it as a I don't see race type thing, honestly. I just kind of wanted to watch things that I liked and listen to things that I liked. But nowadays, like, if there is representation, I really like it. If there isn't, that's cool.
So I know a lot of friends, and I sometimes even, we find characters, and we're like headcanoning them or something to be trans, because there's no like indication that they're not necessarily. Because any character, I don't know, like finding yourself in media can be a really powerful thing, and there's almost no representation of trans people, and also in mainstream media there's almost no representation of like people of color either.
Sometimes you just kind of have to like ignore it as much as you can, or else you'll just drive yourself bananas thinking about how you're not represented ever.
So how do you currently identify in terms of race and ethnicity, gender, and sexuality?
Race, I guess I'd be white. And then sexuality, I just personally I'd say like pansexual, but people that ask I'd just say bisexual, because that's another thing of what does that mean? And you're like, I don't want to explain this to you.
I'm also bi, but I don't love the idea that you have to like label what you are, or that you like owe people an explanation or a definition of what you are.
Sexuality's been a long game. There was a while in like high school I was like, I'm pretty straight, and then I was like, well, maybe I'm gay, and then there's another point where like, no, I'm definitely bi, and there's another point where like, I'm pretty sure I'm gay.
I consider myself pan, bi, also a bit on like the ace spectrum community with being like demi.
This one's a little, I suppose, easier to talk about. I'm demisexual. I knew freshman year of college with my first sexual experience, but I never considered myself to be like LGBTQ when I knew that.
I never had an issue really coming to terms with like being not straight. It was a lot easier, I think, pinpointing like being like pan / bi, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, isn't everyone like that? And then I figured out they weren't, and I was like, what?
So I used pansexual for a long time, so I thought it was like inclusive or whatever, but it doesn't fit. So now I'm queer, which I think is more inclusive actually.
Why doesn't pansexual fit?
I don't know. I really can't tell you. It's just the kind of thing where like the more people asked me what I was and I said pansexual, the more I didn't want to say it.
I was talking to one of my friends once, and acquaintances, I guess now. But I was talking to one of them once, and I said I was like pansexual, and they made like a really snide, stupid joke, like, "Would you like frying pans better?" And I'm like I want to hit you.
Ethnicity's easy. I'm Latina, I'm Latinx. I'm Cuban and Honduran. Race is hard because I never really thought about race until I got to college. It's just the way in this country that label, like not Latinx, usually Latino or Hispanic, has been like construed is that's a race, right? So like when people take that as like, okay, that's your race, up until you get to a point where you start talking to people that really like think deeply about race and ethnicity.
Racially Muslim or brown. Although in Egypt I'm considered white, especially in the US. Like, you don't necessarily, like, a lot of people talk about like how they didn't know that they were a race until they came to the US. Muslim has taken on a racial category in the US.
I didn't necessarily understand Judaism as an ethnicity growing up because I didn't know the difference between race and ethnicity. And I remember people telling me, like, you're not white, you're Jewish. Like, in a way, I think to other.
Like, also, my parents are working class, and I lived in a very white, middle class, upper middle class area. So at some point tried to like whitewash and pretend that I wasn't as poor as I was, after kind of being ridiculed for like having certain kind of clothes or saying things a certain way.
The first time in the US was actually when I came back from Egypt this summer. And I was passing through customs, and the way that they treated me was like nothing. Like, I have never been treated that nicely. As I was walking out, there's a Muslim family right behind me, and the TSA agent stopped them and started like yelling at them and being like, "What's in those boxes? Like, why do you have all these boxes?" And I like tried to like intervene, and he was like, "Move along, ma'am." Like, you know, like it made me feel like I did not want to pass as white at all.
And so it was always like my identity, but I think that sometimes, and probably like all of middle school, I kind of hid that part of me because I'm white passing. I mean, when you're young, like, and someone's like, "You're weird," then you're like, okay, I'll stop.
A word that I often hear put on me is lesbian, and I struggled a lot with it, almost in the sense of like shaming people who are lesbians, but I've like come to terms with the fact that like it's just not me. It's other people, but it's not me. Because the word lesbian has a lot of gendered connotations that don't fit. And also, my partners aren't women either.
Probably like one of the blatant times that someone put that label on me, and it just kind of hit me off guard. My best friend was talking to this guy. He rides a motorcycle, and I was in her room our freshman year, and she went downstairs. She was like, "Bye, Bree." I'm like, "Honey, where you going?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm going to meet up with this guy." I'm like, so I grab my jacket, I run downstairs with her, and I'm standing behind her, kind of like a bodyguard. Just folded arms, just look like, "What's up?" I'm in a hoodie, like. And he was like, yo, let's take a ride. He had a friend down there too. But we stood around and we were talking. And he looked straight at me, dead in the eye. And he says, so Bree, you got a girl? And I was like, no. I was like, I don't have a boyfriend either. I mean,
So I work for the State House, and I work as a page with one of my friends. He's a very nice guy. One day, like, we were going, like, he was driving me back home, and we basically were just talking about, like, people that were hot and stuff like that. And I happened to mention that I had been with guys before, and he was, like, literally confused for about a minute or so. He's like, wait, you've been with guys? I'm like, yes, I'm bisexual. And you, like, literally paused because, like, he said from, like, he's paused for, like, 5 minutes or so because, like, he was genuinely, like, struck, like, by surprise because, like, he said he would not have known otherwise if I hadn't tell him.
Sexuality was not like a issue growing, like was not like an issue, meaning like it was not even something that I identified as something that you would identify by, like, you know what I mean? I think I still carry that a little bit right now because I don't think that what most determines like what happens with me and how people interact with me is my sexuality. I've got some privilege in that respect because I can pass, you know, as straight and as not asexual even very easily.
I am a bisexual woman. I am currently in some state of the closet. And I don't like using that because it makes me think I'm trying to hide from myself or something like that.
I'm just a black guy who just likes other guys and girls a lot.
So are you okay with like being in this documentary and like it being shown to people?
Yeah, I am. Like I said, I'm working on being more open. I think part of that is being okay to look at the world and be like, hey, I'm queer. I don't care if you know or if you don't know.
But then as I got older, it just became more important to me to be proud of who I was. Did you say gender and then?
Sexuality.
Gender's easy. I'm cis as fuck.
Gender is a little tough.
Cis what?
Cisgendered.
Cis.
Cis female.
Okay.
I go between like gender queer and gender neutral and like random percentages here and there. Some days I wake up and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty tough. Big tough guy. I'm gonna go be tough at the gym. Some days I wake up and I'm like, God, I just don't want to have to put on that facade today.
I identify as a trans man, kind of also genderqueer, because I would like to present in a more femme way, which confuses a lot of people.
In terms of gender, I identify merely as non-binary in some capacity.
Most people still use he.
Do you mind that?
No, sorta.
Okay.
Sort of mind it. It's I guess I'm not like 100% comfortable with myself yet. So if it's like my close friends, all of my like really close friends use they, but like my coworkers and like my less close friends all use he, and I don't really correct them because it's just, that's a conversation in and of itself that I don't know if I want to have.
For a long time, I started to identify as non-binary, and I used they them pronouns for a long time, from the end of high school till early college. It was difficult at first coming to terms with like identifying binary, but also relating still a lot to being non-binary, being like non-binary binary.
When you look at somebody and you can tell that, you know, they're black or they're white, there are certain like preconceived notions that come with that depending on like how people grew up, their experiences with black and white people. But if somebody looks at me, their first question is, what? I've gotten the question, what are you, more times than I can count.
There was a very bizarre experience I had on Halloween. just kind of did this like vampire outfit, and I had like this long curly wig and this elaborate dress, and it was like very feminine. And I went out trick-or-treating because I love Halloween. I was going door to door with my friend, and we exited one of the doors. Well, yeah, we left one of the doors, and I heard something. I was like, he looks pretty good in that dress. And I was like, I didn't hear that correctly. They're not talking about me. Like, what? Because I get misgendered all the time. Like, what? And then it kept happening, and I was like, oh my God, they're perceiving me as a guy.
Because I had really colorful, longer hair for a while, and now it's really short, and I'm like, I just look like your everyday Chad that goes to the gym and goes home and drinks like a couple of Guinnesses.
And even now, like where I identify as like Muslim culturally, no one or very few people would be willing to give me that. You get a lot of people who are like, okay, well, you don't wear hijab, you're not Muslim, right? That's like the off the base. And then you don't look Arab, so you're not Muslim.
I definitely identify outside of the binary, but 90% of the time I don't dress like I don't present myself like that. I just wear masculine clothes. So people are very dismissive of that.
Before we were together, we were friends, but we were physically together with another of my friends from high school and her former roommate. And we went to a party with one of your friends, and we ended up going to PT's, the local gay bar here, and it's like a hole in the wall. We like sat down kind of away from the rest of the group because they kind of were older, like grad students, and knew each other better, and so we kind of clustered off to the side. And then this like white gay boy comes up to us, and he like hands us these like fucking coupons
for a hair salon.
Yeah, and like tanning and stuff, and he was just like, I don't remember what he exactly said, but basically insinuated that straight girls would love these.
He said, I'm only giving these to straight people.
It's just like, oh, so are you like 50-50? I'm like, well, no, that's not really. I'm like, why do I have to explain my sexuality? Are you trying to sleep with me? If not, why am I explaining my sexuality to you?
It's kind of disheartening when you hear your friends or your parents or your coworkers say like, hey, or you know, when they hear you talk about in conversation and they say he, or they bring up like just overt straightness to the conversation, and they're like, yeah, isn't that right? And they like nudge you, and you're like.
So just yesterday, I was at a doctor's office, and I like checked the single stall women's, and it was locked, and so I just went into the open single stall men's, and the receptionist got up and like came around the corner and be like, honey, that's not the right one. And like the conversation just kept going to the point that I was like, I don't want to explain to this perfect stranger my complicated feelings with gender and like explain what like social dysphoria is. And so I just was like, this one's open, I'm going to use it.
Labels are a way of sort of letting people know where you stand from a general standpoint. Emphasis on general, because like I said before, things are not always black and white.
They provide people with a way to like understand themselves sometimes.
So something that's very helpful about having a lot of words to describe identity, a lot of words to describe who people are, is that you can find, I guess, more specific words that get close to what you're trying to say.
Even today, identifying as a man, using he, him pronouns, a lot of the ways I felt when I was identifying as non-binary are still the same. Like, I'm still the same person.
I'm a bisexual woman, and that's not saying that to explain it to you because you deserve that information. I'm telling you because you are trying to understand me. That doesn't mean that I want you. That doesn't mean that I'm trying to sleep with you. That means that this is the understanding I have of myself.
I've never had to toe the line with bisexuality. No one's really cared about it. No one's really worried, which surprised me. I have had no problems whatsoever, which is, considering like what I've heard from other people, very surprising.
So you go out one day and you dress feminine and you're really proud of yourself, but someone says something, that's a lot of confidence being torn down immediately. And that's like weeks of building confidence, months of building confidence, enough confidence to go out and identify yourself with who you are. And then you get dismissed by one snide comment or
Exactly.
When I wear makeup or jewelry or dress femme, cishet white men come talk to me. Sometimes if I'm trying to go like work on something in a coffee shop, I dress like hella butch and I'm like want to look unapproachable. I want to look undesirable to men.
I remember seeing an interview of some people who were pretty outraged at Target taking away some of their gendered toy aisles, and they were like, well, what am I gonna do now? Like, how am I gonna get a gift for my like daughter or something if I don't know if it's for a boy or a girl? Like,
it makes you feel, if you're not part of the gender binary, it makes you feel it makes me feel less valuable to people.
Since I stopped wearing hijab, I no longer get identified or recognized in any way as Arab or Middle Eastern or Egyptian. I'm almost always ID'd as Latina.
In the past, I've often been mistaken for Hispanic.
You know, Latinx people like start speaking Spanish to me and I'm like, I can't really speak Spanish.
After Trump was elected, I was very paranoid for about a week that, you know, somebody would attack me or shout some sort of, you know, racist slur and thinking that I was a Hispanic person. And that's not really something that I ever felt like I had to worry about before.
I would be attracted to some girls and not some girls, you know, and so I was like, what is this? Like, what's going on? But then I kind of like suppressed that because I was really attracted to guys. And so, and my parents are really religious, really homophobic, so I think that when you're raised like that, you kind of be just the same way that I was ashamed of my Latinx identity, I could suppress that part of my identity as well.
if I'm gonna represent myself as a trans man and stuff, I have to wear certain things and like behave in certain ways, or else people aren't gonna take me seriously too.
I remember I was eating dinner and I was like, it wasn't even like that effeminate clothing. It was like floral leggings and like boots and like a t-shirt. This dad like herded his children like I was at a table and like they were at the table next to me. He like asked the waiter to like move him tables and like herded his children like they were like cattle away, and I was just like, okay, rude. I'm not like
really fucking rude.
I'm not spewing like queer poison on your food, I promise. I left that at home.
I've been really lucky, I think, to grow up in environments where people never like pointed that out or like tried to like tell me that I was anything other than what I said I was.
I think one unique experience of bisexual individuals is you're kind of not enough for anybody. I've had boyfriends that didn't really like the fact that I was bisexual. They couldn't really do anything about it because what are you gonna do? But I know they didn't really like it, and that comes with like a lot of insecurity. Same thing with girls that I've dated. Just, oh, are you gonna leave me for a guy?
And like I said, I've gotten to a point where I really like don't mind being called Nick just because that's like the common thing. Because, you know, nobody ever asks, oh, are you biracial? Nobody knows that word apparently.
And so sometimes for the sake of oversimplifying myself, I use queerness more as like an identity descriptor rather than like a movement, rather than radical ideology, rather than an entire theory of study, rather than all of the things that I see queerness as. And I think the same thing applies to just using non-binary. I use it intentionally vaguely.
And I always thought, okay, well, if people don't like that aspect of you, or they're not willing to try to understand it, they don't actually like you, right? I also learned that, like, people should accept you for who you are, all facets of who you are, and that them not doing that should mean that you don't want to be around them. Not like, oh, like, I don't want to be around you because you don't want to be around me. Like, no, like, I refuse to allow people to enter my life who would not accept me in the way that I choose to present myself and in the things that I choose to believe in. So hijab did that for me, and it was a really important thing.
I mean, labels is one way of finding your people, right? So like, if we didn't have words for bisexual and straight and gay and trans and stuff, like it'd be much harder for us to convey like who is my people, right?
And I feel that like identity opens the door to having new descriptors and new ways to relate to each other and new ways to describe our lived experiences.
I've met other like young Black bisexual women, and it's just like, oh my God, you understand me. It's like, I don't know, it's almost like seeing another Black person in the class. It's great, you feel good.
What I'm most proud of is being a part of this activist community that I've discovered over time. I think it was life-changing kind of realizing the people that are here working for change in a community that keeps sometimes pushing us down.
In my daily life, almost all of the people I interact with are queer, and then within that, almost all of them are trans.
So like most of my community is very cis, and that's not a bad thing, because there are more of them, so that's just kind of how it's naturally going to be.
I don't have any interest in giving my time and energy to non-woke, like cishet white people. Like I have no energy or interest in like pursuing that.
Yeah, I disagree with my friends on a lot of things, I guess. Like, I think this is a better TV show, or I like this TV show, I like this album, but being like your sexuality / gender is invalid isn't really, that's a deal breaker. That's a friendship breaker.
So who would you consider to be your community?
My community? Oh boy. I just would say the Black community as a whole. Because I never really was involved in the LGBTQ community as like younger, and I never really had any interest in it per se, though I do support it wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I didn't start thinking I was like LGBTQ until I realized I was bi, like this past summer. It never occurred to me that like me being demi was definitely, and me being poly a little bit fits into that as well.
I didn't know the word queer was like not a bad word, right? So I had like when I grew up, like even in high school, like, I had no idea, and now I use it, and so like I think part of like learning that word is what helped me find out who I was.
How do you feel about the term mulatto?
Ugh. When I first learned the word, I thought I was happy to hear it because I thought it sounded really pretty, and I didn't know like the full context behind it, like when it first came to my attention. And then when I learned like the origins behind it, I was like, oh God. I don't know. I wish there was, more positive connotations with it, because at the same time it was nice for a second to have a sense of racial identity.
Sometimes it's difficult to explain like where I fit as a trans man too, because people being like, oh, now that you're identifying as a trans man, are you gonna get rid of like all your clothes and everything? And I'm like, no, I mean, I like my clothes. I mean, some people do, and that's fine.
People like to forget that Latinx people can have all races because it's an ethnicity, not a race. We don't have conversations about race besides black and white. Even in spaces where you think like the people there would think about other races.
I don't really make a huge effort to understand what it means to be biracial in this world, this society, because right now there's a lot of, racial conflict going on in this country, on this planet. And so I've focused more on, having an active voice in that fight.
A lot of the things that the Black community is talking about, I'm interested in, and like I actively try to fight against things like reverse racism being a real thing, or like police brutality. Maybe I actively fight for that community because I know that in the end it will help out my community as well, or maybe I do it because I think that they need help regardless, right? Like
when the Step Show came back and I could look over 1,500 people in the crowd who were just happy to celebrate their culture, happy to see a show, happy to feel like they were a part of USC too. Like, I cried, and I'm not a crier. I was crying because I was like, this this is a victory for us. This is a victory for us as Black people at the University of South Carolina.
The people that I consider to be community are individual people, and people who partake in activism, not specifically the exact type of activism I do, but the frameworks of thought that I have now come to understand.
I think that acknowledging queerness as a word that describes a movement, that describes a people, that describes an ideology is something that's critical to understanding me. I hope that my queer community is not just the white queer faces that I am.
Labels are really important, not only for community, but for identifying problems and advocating for things. There are a lot of health disparities that specifically affect bisexual people, even more than they do gay or lesbians. And I don't want anyone to be reduced to a statistic, but things don't get fixed a lot of times without that data. It doesn't really look like things get fixed anymore, even with the data.
I really believe that if we all, like as minorities, anyone who's being oppressed, come together and help each other with the fight, like we'll win this quicker. Like we'll make things easier. I think that being in the conversation about race in terms of like what's going on with the Black community, that's my responsibility as well to fight for.
So I would say being queer is subversive, and I try to like put it into everywhere I am and be obnoxious about it because it is subversive. At the same time, we're both white, we're both pretty femme, and we're pretty cute. So like all of those things together, it's like, yeah, they're queer, but like it's not repulsive to people sometimes.
Queer culture, we're very like sex oriented. That I think tends to come back and be exclusionary because we're so much like, yes, like we can be affectionate and we can have sex and we can, no one turns around and says like, well, maybe we don't want to. And that's still a valid form of being.
What aspects of your life and identity are you most proud of?
That's tough. Of my life that I'm most proud of?
Identity.
Okay.
Whatever.
Ooh, that's a little bit easier to answer. I guess I'm really proud of the fact that like I finally am being truthful to myself. I wake up and I feel like a girl one day. I'm like, yep, that's fine. That's normal. That's how I should feel. That's how I feel. I'm really proud of the fact that I'm finally in like the final steps of like accepting myself.
In everything that I do now, in all aspects, like not just like in academia, for example, or whatever, in art, in fashion, in whatever, I am trying to teach myself to reorient toward people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, queer people, trans people, people who have disabilities. That work has been more resonant for me.
I seek to make those changes and reflect them with my own organization by making sure that the outreach that I do is not just at like white flight schools, that I partner with like communities of color and other programs, that I make sure that my activism is reflective of my ideals, not necessarily the ideals of who I work for. It's like, because sometimes it's conveyed as like white LG activism, and that's not something that I want to be a part of.
With my gender expression, with my sexuality, I don't look at it as revolutionary. I look at it as more triumphant for my own self. Mm-hmm. What I look at as revolutionary is when I get those small victories as a Black woman, because that's what's threatening. That's what's subversive.
My race as something that I've talked about as important and special to me, I think is also subversive. People don't know how to interact with biracial people on the basis of race, because that's how a lot of people in this country are used to like interacting with people at first. But I hope that makes people think about, the stock that they put into race-based identification of people.
People have a much easier time realizing that food isn't gendered than they do realizing that anything else isn't gendered, like ourselves and like clothing. Like if you say, those are the girls' French fries, like people are gonna be like, what are you talking about? There are no girl French fries, it's just potatoes. But if you say like those are the girls' socks, they're gonna be like, of course they are.